So in this recording, I'm going to show you how we can render dynamic content that is provided by an Angular controller. Up to this point, we've been working with fairly static content, HTML content, uh, and uh, uh, and the data is just hard-coded into the HTML. So what we want to be able to do is to render data that is dynamic, that we are retrieving from a data-driven server application that is perhaps connected to a database for permanent long-term storage. So here we have on the left-hand side of this sample hard-coded static page, we have this list of websites that perhaps we can create new websites and edit them. And right now there's just they're hard-coded using just line items in a long list of items. So we want to make this dynamic from some data that we might retrieve from a server. Right now, in this video, we're not going to be using a server right now. We'll be focusing on how the HTML can retrieve this data from provided by a data source provided by a controller that is responsible for interfacing with the user interface with this page. Right now, it's implemented here in this page, website list, and that long list is actually right here. Is this list right here? This list group. This starts right here and it just goes on and on and on for quite a while. So what we want to do is get a hold of a JSON array of objects, right, and dynamically render this page into the DOM. Eventually the array of JSON objects will come from the server that having queried some database, and then the server would respond with an array of objects. But for now, let's see how we can render dynamic content here on the page. So right now, this HTML is implemented in this website list, and there is no controller associated responsible for this particular page. In the model view controller, it is a controller who provides the data to the view for rendering, and the controller is responsible for retrieving that data from some other middle tier, which it's not the scope of this particular video. It will be in later videos. So for now, let's just work with the controller and the view talking to one another, sharing a model, some data structure that is rendered in the HTML. So for that, let's create a JavaScript file that is going to be responsible for that particular page. So I'm going to follow a naming convention that I'm going to give the same names to the page that I have the same name for the controller responsible for that particular page. So I'm going to say website list, and I'm going to call it controller.js, which we will be responsible for managing this HTML page. Here we're going to create a new controller. We're going to use Angular to create the new controller. To do that, we're going to create an iffy expression, an immediately invoked function expression, right? To create a namespace that is not littering the global namespace. And in here, we're going to grab hold of the web application implemented in the module web app maker, which we've been working in previous videos. So now this dot module retrieves the current application top level module that we've been implementing for throughout several videos. If you want to take a look at them, you can view previous videos. I'll make links of this at the end of this video. So to create a controller, we're going to use the controller function, which allows us to declare the controller by name. We'll create a new controller. We'll call it a website list. Again, the naming convention is to choose names that are that are somewhat related to one another. Website list controller, website list view, or the controller here, and we'll implement it in a function of the same name, and that we're going to declare below. So here's the function where that controller is implemented. And so now we have the controller implemented. Right now it doesn't do anything. It's not actually connected to the view, to the HTML at all. Not yet. We need to make that connection still. To make that connection, we'll need to edit the configuration JavaScript that is configuring the navigational aspects of this application. If you notice, the way we navigated to this HTML, which is this implemented in this HTML, right, in website list, right, this one. The way we navigated to it is by using this URL. See that hash website. So the hash website is interpreted by the Angular routing framework. It is mapped against this route over here, which was declared earlier, right? So we say website maps this particular HTML. That's why this particular page is loading, right? Because this, right, this route maps to this configuration website, right? And that's how this HTML appears, is loaded dynamically and then added to the DOM. So here too, we can, for instance, configure who is responsible, who's the controller responsible for this view. And here's where we can use that name we used earlier when we declare the controller. I think we call it website list controller. Is that what we call it? Let's see. Make sure. In the JavaScript. Okay, we just call it website list. Actually, that's a better name is to fully qualify these things and give them their role, the names as part of the role that they apply should be applicable to the name as well. All right, so now we do have this controller associated to the HTML. Not yet. We still need to load this JavaScript. This controller, we need to load it, and we'll do that in the index page. In the index page, let's load that controller we just declared. So it'll be script source, and that's under views. It's under website and under website list controller. There it is. Okay, so now we loaded that controller, and now they're both tied. To verify that indeed we are here, we're going to log this and see if that prints hello world from this controller. Hello from web list controller. And let's navigate to this page, and let's look at the console, see if that gets displayed in the console. All right, so let's reload this page. And oops, to the control. Oh, there it is. Yeah, notice that it did display it. Okay, but this I'm going to embed this inside of the browser so that we can look at both the HTML and the console at the same time. So there it is. So we are in the controller, so now we have to figure out how these controller, and the view and the HTML template talk to one another. So to do that, let's create an object that would represent the array of websites, right? So to do that, let's create here websites, and maybe create an array, and this will be maybe objects of websites. We might have the title or maybe the name of the website. Right? Let's use some very well-known names. Maybe something like I don't know, Facebook. Right? That's a very well-known name for a website. And maybe a short description. I will say, most popular social service. Okay. And then let's see. Let's say another one, name. And we might say Wikipedia, maybe a short description. Let's say the world's encyclopedia, encyclopedia. Okay. All right. So let's just keep those two for now. So how do we send this information to be rendered on the view, on the template? So one way that the controller and the view can talk to one another is through a framework object called scope. So scope refers to the context of the controller. You know, what portion of HTML is the controller responsible for. Right now, as the configuration determines here, is that the controller is only responsible for this portion of the page, right? All that snippet of HTML which is implemented here in website lists. So the controller is responsible for anything that happens in this page, right? And so if we want to send information from the controller to the HTML, we could use the scope. When we say scope websites, we can create an object on the scope, and we can assign it any data we want to it. Right? Right now, I'm using the same name variable on the scope as the local variable of the declared here. They don't need to match. This could be anything, right? This could be just whatever, right? And we're assigning the data to a variable on the scope, and then now when it's assigned, we can then retrieve that data on the view and render it there. I'm going to change that. I don't like variables that have no meaning. All right, so now that we bound the data to a variable on the scope, the template, the HTML template, can then refer to that variable using Angular template syntax. So for instance, let's see, I believe this is where it renders. Yeah, these are all the dummy list of websites, right? So let's right here refer to that variable name. We call it websites, right? So let's say websites. And save that, and if we go back and refresh this page, notice that indeed we have the array right there. See that? We have the arrays, and we can use that array to dynamically generate this content down on the left-hand side instead of this hard-coded content, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to take that UL, right, and we're going to keep the very first one here, and we're going to use that as a template for rendering all the other instances. We're gonna blow away the other dummy content here. We'll just blow that away. We don't need that anymore. That was only to to display, to see what what it would look like if you had lots and lots of content on this left-hand side. So let me remove that, and I'll keep just one of them, right? Which we're going to use as a template. We're going to say we're going to grab this, right? We're going to grab this and copy and paste this over and over for as many there are in this array websites, right? So to do that, we can use Angular's ng repeat. We say ng repeat, meaning copy and paste this over and over. Repeat this, the following li. Repeat it for every website instance in websites. Okay. So what this does is that it creates. It's gonna ng repeat. What it's going to do is going to take the variable that it was declared on the scope. It's going to iterate over it, and as it iterates, right, over that collection or array, each object instance in that array will be bound to this local variable website. Okay? So as it iterates over each one, right, it copies and pastes this entire content, right, and just adds that to the DOM. So let's save that. I'm going to go back to the page and I'm going to refresh. And you'll notice that it now displays only two items on the left-hand side. Notice that it has exactly the same content, right? Same content because the content in here is hard-coded, right? It's not dynamic. We can change that. For instance, instead of having this hard-coded name over here, we could refer to attributes inside of the website instance as it iterates. We can say, well, I want to refer to, right, to that website instance, right, and any elements, any attributes in that object, which we know we created a couple of attributes, the name attribute and the description attribute. So we could refer to the name attribute here. See that? And so that if we iterate over that again, notice that we have now Facebook and Wikipedia. See that? And what else do we have here that is dynamic, that should be dynamic? Perhaps notice that here we have hyperlinks, right? That presumably would navigate to other pages, right? Website ID, the ID of a website. Presumably that the configuration says that if a website is followed by an ID, it would navigate to website edit. Okay? So we should be able to dynamically render the ID of the current website, but we never declared an ID attribute here. So let's do that. Let's create an ID. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and then an ID here. Actually, I'm going to use underscore ID because later on we're going to map this to a MongoDB database, which uses as unique identifiers uses the attribute underscore ID. So let's see another here. So underscore ID. There it is. So if we go back and refresh the page, and if we hover, actually, which one was it? Oh, there it is. There it is. So let me notice that if I hover, I'm going to make this small so you can see as I hover. See that underneath the hyperlink says that that's bound to website /123 and website. Oh, both of them are 123. So something went wrong there. ID 1, 2, 3. Why are they both 1, 2, 3? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. And the oh, because we never added this, so this should say website underscore ID. There we go. So if we refresh this and we hover, this is 1, 2, 3 and 2, 3, 4. There you go. So we've generated this dynamically, and we'll be using it to render other parts of the page dynamically and navigate and pass data around through the controller.